Everyone. Thank you. Welcome everyone to our seminar series. This is the last one for the semester, and fingers crossed, the last virtual one that required virtual one, I should say. We may have other virtual ones for different reasons, but the hope is the next one in either summer or August, September will be at Old Mac Brewery. And we invite, Chris, you can come down in person at that point to that. So hopefully, fingers crossed, next month in May, we won't be having one because of kind of the end of the semester, the shift into the summer. And in June, we'll be having our, we've got approval at this point for in-person graduation. So we'll be having a graduation commencement for MSRE, which we'll be sending out more formal stuff. But since you're all here and kind of in person in a sense, more than email, we'll be having letting you know we'll having one on the 26th. It's a Saturday is the plan. Again, you'll get more formal information, but just so you can put that on the calendars. It's kind of an exciting time where we're starting to shift, and I may actually meet some of you in person. So with that, I don't know that we have any other real housekeeping items, but we're really excited for our guests that we have today, Chris Cooley and Ashley Tyson. A little background on each of them. So Chris, since 2008, has been top voice, international speaker and leader in the global networking, co-working, I should say, and flexible work industries. He's traveled the world to gain firsthand knowledge of many unique workspace models while co-creating multiple successful, sustainable, flexible workspaces. Chris uses his knack for innovation, background in human design, and unique collaborative approach to identify market opportunities while creating customized engagement techniques for specific personnel and target demographics. He is currently the co-owner of OZworks Group, which is a private online network where OZ-aligned individuals connect with resources specific to their opportunity zone strategies. Ashley Tyson is an opportunity zone Sherpa, practicing attorney and experienced entrepreneur responsible for the founding and growth of numerous enterprises across a wide variety and array of industries. As a co-founder of ozpros.com, he has built a team that concentrates on helping real estate entrepreneurs, developers, and SMB owners with current or future capital gains taxes, create a strategy to be able to make investments in qualified opportunity zones that create tax-free wealth along with the community impact. He's passionate about helping all business owners, big or small, be able to harness the value of opportunity zones. He has become a highly sought after expert in the OZ space nationally while bringing perspective as an entrepreneur, investor, and consultant. I've had the opportunity to speak with Ashley several times and sort of work on a project in some sense, as we discussed something over in Chapel Hill. And then Chris and I have had the opportunity to work on several projects together in the co-working space. And I've known each other for 5 years or so. And both are fantastic in the space they work in. They are experts in their fields, as well as they're fantastic people. They're great individuals. They have high interest in people specifically. That's one of the things that's drawn me to work with them, is their interest in the people and how to help people and understand people. And they've done that within their own businesses as well as clients that they've had. So thrilled to have both of them here. You'll get a sense for who they are real quick. I think you'll enjoy this opportunity to interact with them. Invite you to use the chat function, as Andy found out, you can jump right in and have a dialogue. The interactive element will help. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Ashley's going to give a presentation, and then Chris, and then we'll have time for kind of live Q&A, but again, feel free to have dialogue throughout. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ashley.
Well, thanks, Daniel, and thanks, Chris, for setting this up, and for all of you guys for participating. It's really cool what opportunity zones are doing. I like to tell a story about kind of how I heard about opportunity zones. I was actually at a CLE, and it was after lunch, and there was a guy from Ernst & Young up there, and he had kind of a monotone voice, and he was talking about the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and he just was going on, and like literally half the room was either asleep or doing something else. And he says, well, in about 3 pages, they created these things called opportunity zones, and he gave a description of them, and I kind of perked up, and I was like, holy cow, that's like 1031 and private equity got married. So I run him down in the hall afterwards, and I was like, did I hear you right? He's like, oh yeah. He's like, this is going to be unbelievable. So I run back into the CLE, and I pull up my GoDaddy account, and I take down like 50 different domain names of like Oz, and I'm like thinking about opportunities and stuff. I'm like, oh, Oz, that's cool. So that's what generated kind of the brand for for Oz, which is my consulting company, and OZPros, which is our document generation tool and that kind of drill. But that was back in May of 2018. We popped up a website, and within 2 weeks had $150 million worth of capital gains looking for deals. And I was like, well, I think we're on to something here. And the rest has been, a 3-year, jaunt into the wonderful world of opportunity zones. It's been really cool, and it's been cool to see how these things have the potential to impact areas that have historically been underinvested in. And so very quickly, we figured that the potential for impact of this stuff was unbelievable. And so it's been really cool to see how that's worked. And our passion is doing exactly that, democratizing access to these zones so that people can take advantage of them. So I'm a UNCC alum. I actually played basketball there from 1994 to 97, and graduated from the Belk College of Business. So presenting today is an honor and a privilege, and kind of near and dear to my heart. It's a great honor to be able to give back to a school that's given me an unbelievable amount. So from UNCC, I went up to Chapel Hill to law school, and then came back to Charlotte to practice, and worked for a big firm, and then ultimately, went through a series of kind of, disparate or seemingly disparate changes. I was a 1031 private equity syndicator, where we syndicated 1031 transactions, and developed stuff as well. And then went into the whole M&A space, and got plugged in with some guys that were doing M&A work, which seemed to kind of be like on opposite sides of the spectrum. But like I said, 10 opportunity zones are like 1031 and private equity got married, so it was a perfect match. And so the education that I got at UNCC was a perfect preparation for being able to kind of adapt into doing this opportunity zone stuff. So what are opportunity zones? They are census tracts, low-income census tracts that were allowed to be designated by each governor of every state. And they got to designate up to 25% of those low-income census tracts in some areas that were contiguous to those if they were in a development area that the governors got to pick. And it was created by the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017. And, Trump did an excellent job of taking credit for that and kind of jumping in. And he was actually the impetus that I think actually got the program done. But this is originally a Democrat program that was originated during the Clinton administration. And it kind of made its way through a couple of iterations through a group called EIG, and ultimately got onto Tim Scott's desk. And Tim Scott was like, hey, this thing could really have power to impact communities. And so he took it to Trump and said, hey, can we get this thing through? And Trump got behind it. So as you can see here, here's a map. And, the areas out west, those are bigger opportunity zones because the census tracts are bigger. And so then the areas in the east are usually more condensed. I don't have a map on this presentation of North Carolina and South Carolina, but if you go to www.opportunitydb.com/map, you can search by property address, and you can also search by city. So you could type in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it'll pop up the opportunity zones. But generally in Charlotte, they're the area that's that kind of 85 crescent, stretching from like over about Freedom Drive all the way up to 77, going north like up into Noda. So there's three ultimate benefits in opportunity zones. The first is that you get to defer your money on any kind of capital gains. So unfortunately, you do have to start with a capital gain. So you got to generate a capital gain from somewhere, and you got to take that capital gain and drop it into an opportunity fund. And if you do that within 180 days, you get to defer that gain until December 31st of 2026. So then this December 31st, 2026, I get a lot of questions about that. Why'd they pick that date? That's basically when the Tax Cut and Jobs Act sunsets. And so they needed to tie it to something, so they tied it to that date. So if you are invested 5 years prior to December 31st, 2026, which if you back that up is 12/31 of 21, you get a 10% step up in basis when you pay the taxes in 2027. So effectively, by putting your money into an opportunity fund, you get a negative interest loan from the government. I'm all about keeping a hold of the government's money as long as I can, but this is basically a 5-year deal where you can keep the government's money, put it into an investment, make money off it in the investment, and then get a reduction in your taxes when you pay the taxes in 2027. So those are the first two benefits. The big one, right? It's like, if that weren't enough, I've got another set of Ginsu knives for you. And that is, if you hold your investment for 10 years, you get a step up in basis to fair market value. And as you guys have learned in this course, one of the most powerful things about real estate is that you get to depreciate that real estate against the income tax that's coming in off of it. And so one of the kind of vicious tails of that structure, though, is depreciation recapture when you go to sell that asset. Well, this step up in basis to fair market value makes it so that you don't pay any capital gains tax, and you also don't pay any depreciation recapture. So effectively, it allows you to get that income coming off of it, not pay any taxes, hold it for 10 years, and then exit that deal and be able to not pay the depreciation recapture too. So this is basically a side-by-side analysis of if you were to take $1 million like out of the stock market. So you bought Amazon back in like 1984, and you've made $1 million of capital gains on it, and you put this into a QOZ business deal or a conventional investment. And this assumes that your money just doubles over the 10-year period. More than likely in a real estate investment, it's probably going to do more than that, but we're just trying to use this as illustrative purposes. So the key is that you get to invest $1 million in this deal, whereas you only get to invest $762 because you're paying $238,000 in capital gains taxes. So then in year 5, because you would be invested by December 31st, 2021, you're going to pay $214,000 instead of the $238K. So that's the first, the deferral is the first benefit. That's the second benefit. Then the third, and this is the big one, is that when you go to sell this thing, you're not going to pay any capital gains taxes. And this model doesn't reflect any depreciation recapture as well, but you're going to get $1,785,000, right? Because you paid the $214,000, and you're not going to pay any taxes on that, versus $1.16 million if you did it in a conventional investment into, like the market or whatever. 54% if you're doubling your money. If you do more than that, it's going to be even higher. So it's a really significant tax incentive. So as you guys have gone down through kind of real estate modeling and that kind of thing, you guys understand how important 1 to 2% increases are on an IRR function when you're doing a model. If you really run the numbers on this, it effectively gives you a 3% IRR bump on a standard real estate deal, which in real estate investing world is nirvana, right? That's developer nirvana, getting a 3% IRR bump on a real estate deal. The other key thing is that you can actually invest in operating businesses. And so if you can couple the two, it's amazing how much wealth you can create by not paying taxes on the gains that you're going to have. So let's talk about basically opportunity zones on a page. So this is a summary of that. And the summary is that you have to, once again, you have to start with a capital gain. I wish they wouldn't have done that, because I think that if they hadn't, we would have seen an unbelievable amount of money come into opportunity zones. But I think that one of the things they were trying to do is to attract money out of the stock market into these areas, which is why they made it so that it has to be a capital gain. But you generally have 180 days to invest that money into a QOF. It's 180 days from the tax filing deadline if you have it through, if you're making the capital gain through a partnership or an S Corp. But you got to put that money into a fund inside of 180 days. Now, it's interesting that they said a qualified opportunity fund, because then it's like, well, oh man, I got to put it into like an institutional type deal or whatever. Well, that's not the case, because a QOF, all it is a partnership or a corporation that was specifically formed for the purposes of investing in opportunity zone property. So what this resulted in is the ability for people to create their own QOFs. And effectively, all you have to do is just pull somebody in order to make it a partnership, and it's good to go. So once you've got your money into the QOF, you've got a 90% investment requirement where that QOF has to invest 90% of its assets in qualified opportunity zone property. And so it can make an investment directly into that property. And qualified opportunity zone property is tangible property that's used in a trade or business that was acquired after December 31st, 2017 by purchase from an unrelated seller or by lease, and the original use or substantial improvement happens in an opportunity zone. I'm going to get into the original use or substantial improvement test in a second, but the key thing is, and kind of the basis from behind this, is that effectively what they wanted to do was to drive capital into these areas, and they wanted physical assets to actually be a part of that. And so for your physical assets, you had to either buy new or you had to substantially improve it, so that way you're actually doing something productive in these zones. So an opportunity fund can own that property directly, or an opportunity fund can invest into another entity, which is a qualified opportunity zone business. And once again, that's either a partnership or a corporation that's organized for investing in opportunity zones. And then that business actually becomes the operator and owns either the real estate or actually does a business. And so what they were trying to do here was to create this ability for operating businesses to also receive investment. And so that way money was incentivized to go into manufacturing and services companies and that kind of thing in the zones, and to encourage people to actually move their businesses into the zones. And that has been the effect of this legislation. That's happening a lot. And so one of the things that this opened up the strategy for, though, and the reason why they kind of created this two-tiered deal is because they wanted to give opportunity zone businesses flexibility. So at the business level, you got these 5 tests down here. And that means that 70% of your property at the business level has to be this qualified opportunity zone business property. And so what it did was it effectively gave flexibility to people that are doing real estate deals to basically set an intervening entity up in there. We call it a 2-story house, right? So you got your QOF on the top story and you got your QOZB on the bottom story. And that's typically the structure that we recommend that people do. And so inside of this test, you've got the 70% tangible property requirement, but then you also have this other 5% non-qualified financial property limitation. And so you can't have more than 5% of what your qualified opportunity zone business property is be non-qualified financial property, which is cash, cash equivalents, or stock, bonds, annuities, that kind of thing. So what they didn't want people doing was basically moving financial type entities into the opportunity zones and not paying taxes. And so that's something to be cognizant of inside of your analysis of these deals, is that I've had a bunch of people come and be like, hey, I want to own a stock holding company in the opportunity zone. I want that to be my QOZB. And I'm like, you can't do that. Now, we have figured it out for some crypto mining operations and some other crypto related type stuff, but it's really tricky and it's really complicated. So from an opportunity zone business standpoint, these tests, you got to be careful and you got to be cognizant to make sure you hit them. The other test and the main test that you got to hit inside a QOZB is that 50% of your gross income has to be generated from inside of an opportunity zone. And so that test, and so these are the 5 tests that are kind of broken out, into the specific, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this test right here is based upon a separate 4-part test that you use to determine whether your income is coming from an opportunity zone. And it's that 50% of your gross comp needs to be paid to people that are working in the opportunity zone, or 50% of the total hours need to happen in an opportunity zone, or your tangible property and your management need to home run to the zone. And that means they regularly use the opportunity zone office in the course of carrying out their duties, and they're managed directly, actively, and substantially on a day-to-day basis by one or more employees who carry out their duties at an opportunity zone office. So as in going back up to this, so then let me kind of spell that out again, right? Inside of that test on the gross income piece, if you're a real estate business, it's not going to be that complicated to hit that test. If you're an operating business, it basically means that you need to have some kind of nexus where your employees are coming into the zone. Now, you could use a co-working facility and you could have a lease in a co-working facility, and that would allow you to qualify. So it's interesting because our OZworks group entity is actually a QOZB. And Chris has rented a dedicated office up in an opportunity zone that's in a co-working facility. And then, we're buying chairs, a table, a desk, desktop computer, and the stuff that, the employees will need to be able to go in there. We had a long conversation about a whiteboard, right? And putting up that whiteboard in there, and some cheesy motivational art that we're going to hold on to, and I told Chris, I was like, dude, you got to get the cat picture, right? Hang in there. And, but all of that counts towards your 70% good asset test. And so then the next challenge for us was that we needed to, and I think that I just blitzed my thing. Hopefully we can, I'm back at it now. Is that you need to make sure that your employees are going into the zone. And so those are essentially the 5 tests that you have to hit if you are a QOZB. So the other benefit of having this kind of 2-tiered structure, right? And let me go back to that 5% non-qualified financial property test, is that one of the things that's prohibited inside of that is that you can't own like 51% of another entity. That's going to be forbidden under that 5% non-qualified financial property test, which is one of the reasons why we call it a 2-story house. You can't have an attic and you can't have a basement. So you can't have any subsidiaries underneath that. Now you can have your QOF invest into as many QOZBs as you want, and the QOZB can take money from as many QOFs as it wants, but you can't go any higher or lower than that 2-story house. So inside of that 2-story house structure, one of the other reasons why we use it is that it allows us, right? So we take our money, we take our capital gain, we drop that into the QOF, and as long as we get it in 180 days, we're good to go. That QOF is typically going to have until the end of the year. I'm not going to bog you down with the specifics of that timing test, but it's generally till the end of the year to get that money invested 90% into qualified opportunity zone business property. One of the ways that you can comply with that test is by dropping your cash down into the QOZB, because that satisfies the ownership requirement. And so then once the money's inside of the QOZB, you have a working capital safe harbor that the IRS has allowed you to do in order to spend that money. So if you are an existing company, you have 31 months. And if you're a startup, you have 31 months for each tranche of substantial capital that comes in, up to a total of 62 months. And so accordingly, at the QOZB level, you've got basically 2.5 years, between 2.5 years to 5 years to spend the money and to become an active trade or business that's actually making money. So what this also allows, right, inside of the QOF is that it allows people to set up what we call captive QOFs. So they can effectively set up their own QOF, they can deposit their cash into it, and then and this is particularly effective for people that may not have a property identified, or they can't find another fund that they really like, and they're running up on that 180 days. We do these all the time, where we set these QOFs up for people, and then they drop their cash in, and then that stops that time clock on the 180 days. And then once they're in the QOF, they typically have around a year to figure out what they want to do. And so during that time, they may find another, institutional fund that is out there that's, operating and that's doing business, building stuff. And so if that QOF has a QOZB that they're using in order to build something or own property or do a business or whatever, that QOZB can accommodate money from their direct QOF, but it also can take money from your QOF. So it gives you a whole lot of flexibility about how you can structure these things and how you can take advantage of the time periods and then put the money to work. One of the other things that can be done inside of this QOF QOZB arrangement is that a lot of people are like, okay, well, I don't want to put my money in there and then have it be tied up, because I may need that for liquidity, for living or for other stuff, or they may have dumped their money into a market investment. Well, the interesting thing is that when you put your money into the QOF and then when you drop it down into the QOZB, inside of, and I'll just use this screen in order to illustrate that, you drop your money into the QOF and then you put it down into the QOZB. That QOZB has this 31/62 month working capital safe harbor. And during that time, the cash has to be held in either cash or cash equivalent, but cash equivalent includes loans under 18 months or less. So what it effectively allows you to do is to loan the money back to yourself as long as you loan it for 18 months. And that's at the related party interest rate, which is like 1.2%. And so while you're trying to figure out what it is that you're going to do, or if you know what you're going to do, and while you're working on executing that business plan, instead of having your $1 million sitting in a bank account that's earning 0.1%, you can loan that money back to yourself and you can put it to work in the market. You can put it out for hard money. You could do a litany of different things with it. The other kind of interesting piece about the Opportunity Fund legislation is that the taxes due, right, on your original investment are due on December 31st of 2026. But when you go to pay those taxes, it's going to be based upon what your original gain was or the value of your QOF investment, whichever is less. So if the value of your QOF investment has gone down over the course of time between when you put it in and December 31st, 2026, then you're actually going to pay the money on what the new investment is worth. And so the IRS did this because they wanted to encourage people to go into what were perceived as risky areas. And so if you lose money in the deal, you need to be able to not have to pay the original capital gain, which would effectively create a phantom income tax for you. So what that's also created the opportunity to do is in December 31st of 2026, to get creative about how you value the investments. And if you have any kind of depreciation that happens, to be able to take advantage of that depreciation because it's going to lessen the value of the investment. So that's another thing that a lot of folks are doing. So I'm going to go through real fast about the forms that you got to do in order to comply with this, because there may be some folks on here who are actually contemplating it. But the way you're going to let the IRS know that you're going to be investing into an opportunity fund is on your form 8949. So if you made that $1 million in Amazon stock, you're going to reflect that you're going to put $1 million into your fund directly underneath it by showing a negative number. And you're going to put the name of your fund in the EIN directly underneath that. The second form that the investor is going to file is Form 8997. And this is just going to show how much you acquired during the year and then how much you had at year end. And it's a fairly simple form. And then at the fund level, if you're doing your own fund, then you're going to file Form 8996, which is a 4-page IRS form. And it's actually fairly simple, where you're going to indicate that you, number one, have 90% invested into Opportunity Zone property. And then number two, you're going to indicate, which track number is, like, so which census tract you're investing in, and then what the value of your investments are at the 6-month, the 12-month mark, and then the value of your owned property and leased property. And so it seemed kind of silly, like when we were like originally looking at this form, it's like, okay, why do they want to know the census tract number? And it's become really apparent and really important relative to tracking how effective the program is. And so based off the 8996s, the government's been able to tell how much investment has gone into the different tracks. And it's kind of crazy because it's mainly been like 70 or 75% of the cash has gone into, like, I don't know, it's like 5% of the census tracts. And the remaining tracts have gotten like sparse investment. And the lion's share of those tracts are actually in New York, because there's big swaths of Opportunity Zones up in Manhattan and Brooklyn and that kind of thing that are kind of growing anyhow. And this has sped up the process on that. The Biden administration has specifically focused on trying to kind of fix that and trying to figure out solutions for how they're going to motivate investors to go into other census tracts and other areas that aren't necessarily the areas that are going to be high growth anyhow. And so one of the things that we can count on is that we're going to have some additional reporting requirements that are going to happen in the 8996. So when I was going back through this Opportunity Zones on a page, one of the things that I talked about is qualified Opportunity Zone business property, and the 2 requirements that you have to hit if you're going to if you're going to try to make property eligible for that. And that's that you have to have original use or substantial improvement. So let's talk about what original use is. Original use is basically that it's new, that it hasn't been put in service before. And that means it hasn't been depreciated, it hasn't been rented, and you want to be as close to the certificate of occupancy as you can. You can actually have it, that's not a bright line test, but you don't want to have it to where you have a CO for a significant period of time, because that could be indicative that it could have been put in service, and that would give the IRS an argument that, well, this was capable of being put in service, and so technically it's not original use. The second qualification is substantial improvement. And this means that during any 30-month period that the taxpayer chooses, right? So any 30-month period, you've effectively doubled the value of the improvements of the property. So this is an example of that. So if you're buying a building and the aggregate purchase price of the building is $1 million for both the building and the dirt, and the building itself is worth $250,000, and I don't know, maybe in some areas that would actually happen. Probably not so much in Charlotte, any of the Opportunity Zones here in Charlotte. But let's just say that it was. You have to then put another $250,001 of improvements into that building. Now that can be done via furnitures, fixtures, equipment, that kind of thing. It could be done by adding square footage to the building. It could be done by adding solar to the roof of the building. You could add accessory dwelling units to it if it's a residential area or whatever. Or if you have contiguous property, you could actually build on the contiguous property, and that's going to count towards your substantial improvement requirement. If it's a hospitality asset, or if it's a deal where you're going to have a business operating in there and you need to buy personal property in association with that business. So think Airbnb, you got to buy beds, TVs, dressers, all that kind of stuff. those purchases are going to count towards your substantial improvement requirement. So if you have unimproved land, so this comes up a lot, like raw land, what do you have to do with raw land? Well, it's interesting because with raw land, all you have to do is something. Or if it's agricultural land, you just need to do some kind of different use. So if it's row crops, you can plant timber. If it's timber, you could harvest the timber and then replant timber. If it's just raw land, you could grade the land and put some kind of business on it. The key is that it's got to be some kind of business within that working capital safe harbor. So let's hit some potential examples of, what I've seen in this space. So one of the things that we created, right, was this strategy call process. So you can call in, you can go to ozpros.com and you can book a strategy call. And we had to do that because we had so many people kind of calling for questions and that kind of thing. We needed to have a process for how we could, effectively make a living, but at the same time serve as many people as possible. So I've had around 350 of these strategy calls, and on the strategy calls, I get to hear about lots of different stuff. So there's some really cool ways that people are taking advantage of the program. And one of the ways is that people are selling assets that are not outside of opportunity zones, and they're investing their money into a fund and then doing something inside of the opportunity zone. So I actually own a mobile home park up on the west side of Charlotte, like up by 485. And that property value continues to increase every day by even just sitting there. It was a great levered land play. But I was like, listen, it's time to sell because I can take that money, put it into an opportunity fund this year, get a 10% reduction on the taxes I'm going to have to pay in 2027. And then whatever I'm investing in, I'm not going to pay any capital gains taxes. So I've seen a lot of people that are doing that, right? One of the other things that people are doing is they're selling businesses and they're reinvesting that money into a business that's inside of a zone, or they're starting up businesses inside the zone with their capital gains. So that way they get that 10-year step up in basis to fair market value. We're also seeing a ton of people that are doing startups inside of opportunity zones because it allows them to attract capital from capital gains investors. Another thing that we're seeing people do, and this is actually something that we're working on inside of OZworks group, is that we're seeing landlords that own property in opportunity zones set up co-working or accelerators for companies that want to become eligible to become QOZBs to come into their co-working facility. They get educated about what they need to do, and then they're eligible to receive capital gains benefit. I got a slide for the co-working, and then the final piece is that we've seen a bunch of people doing that same accelerator roll-up co-working space in the blue-collar world. So think HVAC companies, electrical companies, that kind of thing, and they're putting those into an opportunity zone building that they've created, and then they're able to kind of cherry pick the good ones and invest through their fund into those companies. And it makes their building really attractive, but it also sets them up so where they can get a taste of that upside of the operating business. And so with that, Daniel, I'm going to turn this back over to you, and then ultimately to Chris, and then look forward to answering any questions that people may have.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. This is great. And
I'm going to stop my share too.
I'm sure there's lots of questions, so feel free to send those through. I think if you haven't learned about opportunity zones, that may be the best class you can get on opportunity zones. So I think it's fantastic job on.
Sorry, I went fast, but there's a lot to cover in a 30-minute window. So
no, it's great. So with that, we'll shift gears and turn it to Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. We always carve out 30 minutes, and I start looking at the clock like.
And so I said that I was going to go under 30 minutes, and I hope I didn't go over. But anyhow,
it's great, and I do want to say I always love your teleprompter markup. For us it was like John Madden on NFL. Now I guess it's Tony Romo or somebody, but it's always great to see. So I appreciate it. I always love hearing and recapping how the program works. I mean, I'll just give a real brief background. And my introduction to this was through co-working. So for 6 years, I've been working on different consulting projects and launching flexible workspaces all over the world, and came over back to the States to do some work, and it just landed in a project outside of Atlanta in East Point, the city of East Point. And the clients, and Daniel and I had been actually consulting on the project together. And I said, hey, Daniel, do you know anything about these opportunity zones? This was like, what, 2 years ago, maybe, Daniel? And the clients had said, we have this building. The government drew these lines, and one of our buildings on this 27-acre site that's 120,000 square feet falls in an opportunity zone. And we're not quite sure what to do with it, but it sounds really good. And that's how I ultimately got introduced to Ashley. Fast forward a year and a half later, and Ashley came to me and said, hey, that community building stuff, that's kind of your superpower. We want to do something in the opportunity zone industry, because the flood and demand for the knowledge and information is so great that we need something. We need a collective knowledge base. So in essence, what OZworks Group is a co-working space online for opportunity zone people, right? People who are really interested. They've gone past. They've come to an event like this, or they've read a bunch of Google, done a Google search, read a bunch of articles, which you'll find a lot of misconceptions actually if you go through that route, right, Ashley? Versus hearing it straight here from an expert like him. So ultimately, we represent all the things that he just went over. He personally has sold property. I've personally sold a part of my company to put gains into a QOF so that we can operate as a QOZB and grow our company and realize the benefits of the program. So we truly are a partnership that practices what we preach. And so I'm on the other side though, right? I am a guy who builds communities, and you can kind of look at it the same way. You're people who build buildings and maybe even communities as well in a physical sense. So basically what we did with OZworks Group is Ashley came and said, hey, can we build this thing out? We wanted to create a really balanced demographic. So we have about 40% of our community is made up of people who are deploying capital. We've got 40% of people who are looking for capital, and the other 20% are service providers. And so, like I mentioned, a lot of people will come to an event or hear about opportunity zones through their employer or a client or something like that. And then what do? Right? So you've got all this information from Ashley. You can schedule a discovery call with him. You can do some more research online. You can listen to podcasts, or you can join a collective like what we've set up at OZworks Group. And so I just want to take a second to show you, people are really interested in how to take these next steps. We have set up a very accessible community so that you can move from basic knowledge and excitement, which is exactly what happened to me. It took me a year to find somebody, and it was actually Ashley that called me back, and then we generated a community with hundreds of somebodies that can help support each other. So I'm just going to share my screen here real quick and show one slide, and then I'll show you a little tour. Can you guys see this okay? Daniel, can you see this? So this circle represents the OZworks Group community. Within this circle, there are all kinds of different resources and amenities that we provide. At the center point is the critical component. It's the member. So we really designed this to be a concierge connected service. And Daniel, I just recently, I think yesterday, connected you with one of our real estate developers who's a member. They manage very, very significant opportunity zone funds and projects across the western, southwestern part of the US and all the way up into Alaska. But that company is called Caliber, and they have 15 jobs, real estate professional jobs ready that they're looking to fill right now, right? And that type of connection that I know Daniel's in our platform. I know he's connected to opportunity zones and real estate. I can actually make those facilitations happen. So the connectors are people on our team that actually make those introductions happen. The expert support, people like Ashley who are in the platform that are service providers that can answer questions and also connect to say, hey, this is maybe the direction you should go, right? This is what I've seen. This is what's happening. Policy experts. So we've got people connected to the legislation that can answer questions about timelines and tax strategy. And then peer support. So every Friday we have a Zoom. We do an intake interview with all of our members, so we get to know who you are and what your particular strategy is. So there are real estate developers. There are people who are deploying funds and people who are looking for funds. Every Friday we do what we call a little mini pitch-o-rama, where members can show their pitch decks, get critique on it, so they get the eyes of investors as well. So there's a bunch of other components to this, but I wanted to show you, like, this is what we're doing and taking all the best components of the physical collaborative spaces and applying them online. So I'm going to give you a quick demo of the platform just to show you what it looks like. It's sort of like a blend between Facebook, Thread, Slack channel, and something like a LinkedIn profile. So we've combined all that, and you think of it, that circle that I just showed you, that this is sort of the boundary of the platform. It's a paid membership platform. We'll get into that in a second, but so everybody who's in it is very serious. This is a quality over quantity type of network. There are networks out there, 10,000 different people, listings that you can select, but it's not a true relationship building opportunity like this one is. So you can kind of think of like an ongoing 24/7 event that's happening with knowledgeable people inside of it. So I just want to show you a brief overview. We have topics carved out. These are areas that highlight different service providers. There's a whole real estate development section in here. So specific podcasts, we do different events that are specific to different topics. We just did one on compliance. And so these are things that are only available to our members. There's also this whole job posting section in here as well, which Daniel, I just mentioned, he and I connected on. So he may even be sharing some job opportunities with you all. But in that, there's, in each topic, there are different ways to interact and to meet different people. We do breakout rooms on all our live events, so you get to interact with real life professionals. And the other piece to this, and I'm going to reference right back to Ashley. Ashley is part of the community, and he has been gracious enough to implement some video courses. So our members get access to, as part of their membership, connection to the introduction to opportunity zones. So this is where you can dive in a little bit more with those video training tutorials that actually break this down in real I won't say layman's terms, right? It's more complex than that, but so people like me can understand it. I will tell you that going through the formation of the Opportunity Zone program, it was something that I just leaned into. So maybe some of you are sitting there like leaning into this, but then you step back and go, okay, where do I start, right? And so these are great resources to really start. And it's just a fun environment to be in. Lately I've been saying, the Opportunity Zone program is like, there's this whole middle ground. It's suits and ties in DC, like setting policy, and then it's sneakers and jeans in people who are actually like launching the businesses, being in the startup community, setting up the real estate deals. And in between, there's really not a whole lot of connectivity happening. So Ashley, I mean, we kind of have an opportunity to even set policy standards by this is the power of the crowd, right? And so just wanted to share this with everybody, and also say that I know that there's a kind of a varying degree of people that are listening and that are on this right now. I think the majority of you are students, but if there's industry professionals, Ashley and I talked about this with our team as well, and with the team at UNC Charlotte, and we wanted to make a membership to this available at a significantly discounted rate. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. If you're interested, please go ahead and click that, or send me an email. We also, for students, wanted to carve out an even more significantly discounted rate. So if there are students that are listening and interested in this, just send me an email. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and we'll let you know what that looks like as well. So Ashley, is there anything you want to add? I know you said like democratizing access in the beginning of your presentation to this type of industry knowledge. So anything you can actually see, there's an event going on right now live, by the way, in the platform with our members. So they're doing their connection thing while we're doing ours over here. But Anything you wanted to add to this,
We were
man?
missing out, man. You know, we
I know.
we should have coordinated this inside that live event, right? So that way we could have shared the whole. We could have had this like gigantic, you know, connection session.
We've been talking about doing some stuff like that with the university, so maybe there's some things down the road. But first steps first is like, hey, let's share what we know, right?
Yep.
So that's what I have. You got anything to fill in? I'm gonna drop a couple links in the chat here, and if people want to connect with us, please feel free.
So, I mean, I can fill the rest of the hour with just thoughts on kind of follow up to that, Chris, but I wanted to make sure that we don't have any questions. I haven't seen any pop up in the chat, but does anybody want to like click their microphone off mute and ask a question?
I'll throw one out there just to get started, Ashley. I know I saw something in a chat about the question regarding OZs, no sin business, and breweries. And you know, given the excitement around breweries and the popularity in areas that are in opportunity zones.
Yeah, I kind of glossed over that one. That's my bad. On the sin business test, that's the 5th test. And the key on that is off-premises alcohol consumption. And so if you are selling, like if you're a cash and carry store for off-premises alcohol consumption, that's a problem. If you got a tasting room, that's not a problem. Or if you're manufacturing and you're selling to a distribution network, that's not a problem. And so breweries are actually okay. The same with distilleries. Golf courses are actually not okay. And hot tub facilities, massage parlors, or spas are also not okay. And so if you're looking to set up a hot tub facility, I'm sorry. Anyhow, so and it's kind of an interesting thing, you know, about and if anybody else has got any other questions and they want to jump in, feel free to click off or I think we may have some in the chat. Or is that you, Chris?
That's me, man. I'm just making things available for people. But
Okay.
I actually have a question. Ashley, I've been meaning to ask you.
Perfect.
What about policy changes? So I just got an email or a message from someone through OZworks group that knows that our company is formed as a QOZB. They know the situation that I sold a part of my company in New York and that we're, you know, rolling it into a fund that funds a new startup business in a zone, meets compliance. And the link I just got said that there's a bill or legislation, there's some paperwork on the governor's desk that would kind of nullify my gain exemption or you know, the benefit of that gain, rolling it into an opportunity zone. So can you maybe talk about that a little bit? Like, one, for my own personal information, but two, I think it's great to talk about the policies that are on the table.
Yeah, so that's specifically New York legislation, where they have sought to decouple from the IRS rules. And it's actually really fascinating. We actually had this conversation on the Novogradac working group yesterday. And North Carolina actually exempted out of the Opportunity Zone legislation literally like in April of 2018. And I think that part of that was because I don't think they really understood exactly what the program was designed to do. But the second piece is that there's a lot of states that are really focused on balancing the budget. And I think that New York was concerned about, you know, its deficit right now. And so they were concerned about deferring the taxes that were due until 2027. And so they elected to decouple. So you won't be able to defer your state taxes in New York until you'll have to pay those this year if that legislation gets signed by Cuomo. And then the legislation actually does not address the 10-year step up in basis to fair market value. So you'd still be eligible for that with respect to your state taxes. But you will get it regardless on the federal piece. Now, what's interesting about that is that what they've done is they've created a disincentive for people to come to New York because people are still going to have to pay taxes in New York if they're doing a real estate deal there. And it's like, what are you guys thinking? It's the same way with North Carolina. It's like, why would you do that? because effectively, number one, it makes you know, if you're looking at a deal between North and South Carolina, you're like, well, I'm going to South Carolina. And then number two, if you own a deal, right? So when I set up funds for people, I usually set them up. If they're North Carolina residents, I set it up in South Carolina. So that way, if they move prior to the 10-year exit, they don't pay North Carolina tax on that.
Yeah, cool, man. I think it's great to note like this, that this is a national program. And that's one of the neat things that we found in OZworks group, right? Is that there are pockets all over the country of people who are realizing that there are like-minded individuals that they might have never even met before. In fact, we were talking with Lauren about her trip to Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico, the island of Puerto Rico is 95%, right? Opportunity zone. And so for me in New York, it's like, hey, maybe I'll just 6 months in a day move to Puerto Rico, and in the middle of winter here, that doesn't sound too bad at all.
Yeah, it's a pretty good arrangement. There's a whole host of tax deals associated with Puerto Rico too. We won't get into that. There's a question from Kevin McNally here. It says, is there any direct way to take advantage of Oz's as a merchant retail developer? We typically buy, build, and dispose of projects within 12 to 18 months. So, so there's not on the short term, right? So if you're selling something before you get to the 10-year hold at the QOF level, you're going to you're going to pay taxes just like a normal deal, right? And you're also going to pay income off of the rent just like a normal deal. But once you get to the 10-year hold at the QOF level, it's a game changer, because any capital asset that the QOF owns at that point in time is eligible for the step up in basis to fair market value. So if you were to set up a fund now in April of 2031, you could have a development that you started in April of 2030, and as long as you've held that thing for 366 days, you're going to get the benefit. So once you get to the 10-year hold, absolutely, you're all good to go. Prior to that, not so much. Second question is, for the example you gave, if the building is $250,000, why do you have to put up $250,001 versus $250K? So they said it's got to be double the basis plus $1. I don't know why they added in the dollar, but I guess that's the IRS's rounding error, right? So that's the 250,001. We got a number. Is there a buffer zone for Oz funds outside of the lines? Unfortunately, no. If you're in, you're in. If you're out, you're out. Unless, and so this is the big caveat on that, is that if you have property that is contiguous to a parcel that's inside of the zone and it's just separated by a street or a stream or a river or something like that, then as long as it's less than 50% of your deal, then you can incorporate that parcel into the mix. And I think that that's all the questions that have come in thus far. In my view, have opportunity zones provided the benefit to underdeveloped and struggling areas that they were originally set up to fulfill? Sounds great for investors, but I'm curious if you'd say these areas have received commensurate benefits. So unequivocally, yes. Unequivocally, yes. Now, has it been democratic? No, right? I mean, there's just opportunity zones that within the way that you got to design a program, that are going to rise to the top, right? That are going to be places where people were probably going to invest anyhow. And so those areas are probably going to get the share of the funds. But then there's other areas, like there's a deal where they're putting in a bio education center down in South Carolina. It's out in the sticks, and it's in an opportunity zone. And the only reason why they put it there is because it's an opportunity zone. And so as a result, these guys are going to get roughly $1 billion worth of capital injection just on that project, let alone the attendant economic benefit. And so, I don't necessarily know that, you can say, yes, every opportunity zone has benefited from this. But this is the first time, I think, in history of legislative programs that we've seen the level of private investment be willing to undertake, an endeavor like this. And so, is it perfect? Absolutely not. Is it an unbelievable step in the right direction? Yes.
Actually, can I add to that actually? You know, one of the things that I'm noticing in the OZworks group is the direction and the lean toward operating businesses within this model, right? And the real estate portion of this is challenging from an equity standpoint to buy properties, to exchange capital, and to really have that true DE&I sort of initiative attached to it. It's the operating businesses within the properties that provide more flexibility for entrepreneurship and growth of the companies that represent these communities. And we've made a commitment at OZworks Group to embrace and engage with a DE&I initiative to make sure that we're being accessible for all types of people. And something that came up and was said to me the other day with one of our committee members who's fairly high profile in the industry, she said, no other groups are doing this. And so it is challenging. And I want to say that the program is still somewhat in its infancy. Now there's a timeline to get into it, right? So the infancy is actually aging very quickly. So it's young and aging all at the same time, like we all are, right? But it's interesting to me to think how quickly this rolled out and how the more we're able to embrace the communities and truly get them involved, the longer the policy will potentially last or be renewed or revisited versus, you know, having stories of failure. And I think the challenge with the social impact of this also comes with the short timeline of what's been out right now. So to tell really positive stories and make positive change, it doesn't happen overnight, right? You have to start to educate people and help empower them in different ways. And so this program, you know, going on 3 years or whatever the timeline is right now, actually close to 3 years, you know, everybody wants to know all the positive stories that have come out. And like, there's lots of things being set up for positive stories to happen, but we all have to be really committed to that type of conversation. And we definitely are in our group. And I'm finding that a lot of the people who are initiating and being involved in these types of QOZBs, they are extremely conscious of the social impact around this program. So it takes a blend and a fusion between the investment, the real estate development, and the businesses and the in the zones to make this thing really successful. So hopefully that helps.
There's 2 remaining questions. I'll hit those real fast because I want to be cognizant of ending on time, Daniel, and I know we're over time already. But the governors got to pick each census tract. So the Congress basically pushed that out to the governors for them to choose. Typically, the governors push that down to their Department of Commerce. That's who chose it in North Carolina. And then we're seeing you can pretty much layer any kind of subsidy financing. So new market tax credits, LIHTC, that kind of thing with opportunity zones. And pretty much every opportunity zone is eligible for new market tax credits. So we're seeing a bunch of that. And I think that coupling will go to address your issue, Chris. And I think that will continue to expand the stories that we're seeing happen because people are going to twain the two of these. And as we know from LIHTC and new market tax credits, you know, driving capital into those things requires a significant amount of time, right? It's got to have, in order for private capital to be interested in that, you know, it takes an amount of time to be able to kind of show the effect of it. And I think that goes to your point, Chris. And I think that we're going to see lots of great things continue to happen. And hopefully they'll end up extending the program or they'll have some kind of supplement to it. You know, maybe they designate some new zones or maybe they redesignate the ones that really need it or something like that. But I think that we'll probably see something like that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think there's obviously a tendency to think it's going to sunset. So is it worth even, you know, exploring? And so I think by exploring, there's if things are going well or going in that direction, then government's incentivized to continue providing those sorts of mechanisms to help. So we'll see how that goes. But this has been great. I really appreciate Chris and Ashley coming on. It's great to have you both. a great wealth of knowledge. Hopefully those who are on got a little some education with opportunity zones, but then also some broadening of perspectives on what might be available for you or your companies or those you work with. Lots of really cool stuff going on and available. So thanks for all those who have joined. Again, thanks, Chris and Ashley. This is invaluable education, and hopefully the students, I know, Chris, you have your email there. I'll tell the students, hopefully or those on the call, you've seen from this interaction that both Chris and Ashley are very interactive, and I'll speak for them, but would be glad to make a connection with any of you. So again, thank you, and appreciate it, and excited to see where OZworks goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Chris, for setting this up. And if you want to get connected, you want to learn more, OZworks Group is obviously a great place to do that. You can also visit the website. All my contact information is on there, and would love to help anybody with any kind of issues they've got.
Perfect. All right, everyone, have a great weekend. Enjoy the spring weather, and it's 70s down here, Chris, so feel free to come down and visit.
Rain and 43.
Yeah.
I got that hunt lined up for us, Chris, so we got to talk.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon then.
Okay.
Hey, thanks, everyone.
All right. See you guys.
See ya.
See ya.
Daniel, can I ask you a question real quick?
You bet.